It started with one mistake. I wish I could say it was something dramatic, like insider trading or blowing $1 million deal. But no. My downfall came in the form of an overlooked email, buried under spam, sent by a client my boss specifically told me to prioritize. That one missed message triggered a chain reaction I never could have imagined. Her name is Ms. Valencia Hart. She's my boss, but calling her just that doesn't capture the power she commands. When she walks into the office, the room shifts. She's elegance and authority in motion-tailored suits, sharp heels, and a glare that can melt titanium. When the missed email was discovered, she didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. She just said, "My office. Now." I stood in front of her, the pit in my stomach hollowing out. I was already preparing to update my resume, but she didn't fire me. Instead, she walked slowly to her desk, sat down, and said something that would change my life. "If you can't handle responsibility like a man, perhaps you'd be better suited for something else." I blinked, unsure what she meant, but her smirk deepened. "I don't like repeating myself. Starting tomorrow, you'll report to me under a new title, Executive Personal Secretary. And trust me, darling, the job comes with a new wardrobe." At first, I thought she was joking. I even laughed nervously. She didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words. Secretary? Wardrobe? What did she mean? The next morning, a neatly wrapped box was waiting on my desk. Inside was... I couldn't believe it. A soft pink blouse. A pencil skirt. Stockings. Heels. Even a name tag that read, Miss Sloane. My real name's Erin. There was a note tucked inside. Be on time. Be obedient. And be fabulous. VH. I froze. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. Was this some kind of punishment? A game? A test? I stared at the clothes for what felt like an hour. But I showed up. In that exact outfit. And the moment I stepped into her office, I saw that same smirk return. "Now, don't you look precious," she purred. "Let's begin your real training." I didn't recognize myself in the mirror that day. The soft pink blouse clung to my frame in a way that made me stand straighter, more cautious. The skirt felt restricting with every step I took. And the heels, they weren't just footwear, they were shackles I couldn't ignore. Each click on the tile floor echoed my humiliation, or maybe my awakening. I couldn't tell which. The office didn't laugh. They didn't even stare. Ms. Hart had already sent a memo. "Sloane is joining my executive support team. Treat her with the same respect as me." That name Sloane kept hitting me like a cold gust every time someone said it. "Sloane, file this." "Sloane, can you schedule the meeting?" "Sloane, Ms. Hart wants you in her office." She trained me mercilessly. From posture to penmanship, she transformed everything. If my walk wasn't graceful enough, she made me repeat it down the hallway in those heels until I glided. If my tone lacked sweetness, she'd pause and say, "Try again," with poise. "You're not barking orders. You're offering elegance." One day, she handed me a lipstick. It was deep red, classic, bold. "Apply it." "In front of me," she said, folding her arms. My hands trembled, but I obeyed. "That color suits you," she whispered. Sassy, but controlled. That word again. Sassy. It followed me like a label she had sewn into the lining of every outfit she assigned. It was her version of armor. And whether I liked it or not, I was wearing it now. Then came the real test. She was hosting a client dinner, and she made it clear. Sloane would attend as her guest, not just her secretary. She sent a shimmering black dress to my apartment, along with heels taller than anything I'd ever worn. When I arrived at the event, she didn't greet me like a subordinate. She extended her hand, fingers curled like a queen, and said, "You clean up well, Miss Sloane." I almost choked, but I smiled. I had to. Throughout the night, she introduced me to executives. "This is Sloane. She keeps me organized and utterly charmed." They believed it, because the more I played along, the more I saw a new reflection looking back at me. Confident, composed, feminine in ways I never imagined myself being. And Ms. Hart noticed. Every blush, Every stammer. Every graceful nod. She leaned in close that night, her breath warm on my ear, and said, "See? You were always meant for more than emails and spreadsheets. You were meant to sparkle." After the client dinner, something shifted. Ms. Hart didn't treat me like an experiment anymore. She treated me like her creation. And I wasn't sure if I hated that or craved it. Back at the office, things escalated. The outfits she picked for me became bolder, tighter pencil skirts, silk blouses with delicate ruffles, soft cardigans in pastel shades. Always paired with heels. Always with a note. "You're representing my standard now, Sloane. Look the part." She even assigned me a new desk, not out front with the other assistants, but inside her office, just beside hers. A small nameplate sat atop it. "Sloane Darling, Executive Assistant to Ms. Hart." Darling. I thought it was a joke at first. But she smirked when I saw it. "If you can carry yourself like that in front of a dozen CEOs, you can carry that name too." And I did. Slowly. Hesitantly. But not everyone at the office was supportive. Some whispered when I walked past. One of my old coworkers, Darren, pulled me aside. "Man, what's she doing to you? You were management material. Now you're her." "I'm her assistant," I interrupted, voice steadier than I expected. He stared at me, like I'd disappeared and left this polished stranger in my place. But deep down, I knew what bothered him. It wasn't that I looked different. It was that I looked sure of myself now. Ms. Hart called me into her private lounge that afternoon. There was music playing, something soft, jazzy. She offered me tea in a delicate floral cup. "You handled Darren well," she said. "But you hesitated. Tell me why." I shrugged. "I guess I'm still adjusting to all of this." She stood behind me, resting her hands on my shoulders, her tone low and firm. "Sloane, you're not adjusting. You're awakening. That's what scares them, that you've stepped into something they can't control." I didn't reply. I couldn't. My throat tightened with a mix of fear, pride, and something else I wasn't ready to name. "You're mine now," she whispered. "Not in a cage, but in refinement, in elegance. And when you walk into a room, they'll know you belong there, because I made you ready." And that night, as I stood in my apartment, slipping out of the silk blouse she'd chosen, I stared at my reflection. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. It was a transformation. And I didn't know if I could ever go back. The next morning, Ms. Hart left a message on my phone before I even woke up. "Meeting. 9 a.m. sharp." Wear the gray skirt suit I had delivered. Hair up. Red lips. I expect precision today. The tone was clear. No negotiation. I didn't question her anymore. I couldn't. The moment I zipped up that tailored gray skirt and buttoned the jacket, something shifted in my posture. I wasn't just dressing the part, I was becoming it. I arrived at the office early. Everything about me felt polished. Click of my heels, curve of my hip as I walked past the windows. Heads turned, but not out of mockery. Out of confusion. Curiosity. Even respect. Inside Ms. Hart's office, she barely glanced at me. "You're late." I looked at the clock. "It's 8:50. And I said sharp. Sharp doesn't mean 10 minutes to prepare. It means being prepared 10 minutes ago. That's when I realized this was the test. And I refused to fail. For the next hour, I juggled 3 phone calls, managed her appointments, reorganized a client dossier, and prepped her coffee just the way she liked. Double espresso, no foam, in a white porcelain cup with a gold rim. Every task I completed perfectly. And for the first time, she looked at me not as her subject, but as her equal. "Well done," she finally said. "You're learning obedience and initiative. That's rare." It should have insulted me. But instead, I felt a jolt of pride. Then came the surprise. At 11:30, she handed me a red envelope. Inside was an invitation embossed, elegant, and terrifying. "Ms. Hart requests your presence at the annual executive gala. Dress code, black tie." My breath caught. I'm not ready for that," I stammered. She tilted her head. "You're already living the role, Sloane. Now you'll show the world." She handed me a garment bag, next. "Your gown is inside. You'll wear it tonight." I'll have my stylist do your makeup.
I didn't speak.
I couldn't, because beneath the fear was something I never expected.
Excitement.
That night would change everything. Either I'd break under the pressure, or I'd finally step into the persona she'd been molding me into. The gown fit like it had been made for me. Strapless, black satin, with a subtle slit that revealed just enough to be provocative, not inappropriate. The neckline framed the delicate pendant Ms. Hart had slipped into my hand before I left her office. A symbol, she whispered, that you belong tonight. Her stylist worked in silence. Nails were painted a deep crimson. My hair was twisted into an elegant updo. Lips matched the dress bold, perfect, unmissable. When I finally looked in the mirror, I didn't see the person I used to be. I saw Sloane confident, polished, controlled. The ride to the gala was a blur. Ms. Hart sat beside me in the limo, calm as always. She wore a sleek navy gown, her presence commanding without trying. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, the pendant cold against my skin. When we arrived, the flashbulbs were already popping. Executives from all over the industry. Names I only knew from headlines. And now I was stepping into that world, not as a plus one, but as her chosen companion. She took my arm. Smile, she said softly. They're watching. Inside, everything sparkled. Chandeliers, crystal glasses, polished conversation. I did my best to keep up nodding, smiling, laughing when it felt right. Ms. Hart guided me through the crowd like a conductor through a symphony. At one point, I found myself standing with 3 senior VPs from our biggest client account. Is this your new assistant? One asked, raising an eyebrow. Ms. Hart didn't flinch.
No.
This is Sloane. She's my reflection. Sharp, reliable, and far more elegant than you deserve to meet tonight. They chuckled awkwardly, unsure how serious she was. But her hand remained firm on my back. That's when I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. This wasn't some elaborate punishment. It wasn't just about control. It was about transformation. About becoming something she believed I could be even if I hadn't yet believed it myself. We danced once. Just once. But the way her fingers guided mine, the way she whispered in my ear, "Don't look down. You belong here," it sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the cold champagne. By the end of the night, people weren't asking who I used to be. They were asking, where did she come from? And the truth? I wasn't sure myself anymore. The limo ride back was quiet, but not uncomfortable. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, the dress still perfect, heels still on, heart racing beneath the surface. Ms. Hart hadn't said much after the gala. Just one long look as the door shut behind us and a soft, unreadable smile. As we pulled into her private driveway, I expected her to hand me off to a driver, to send me home with a thank you. She didn't. Instead, she turned to me as the engine idled and said, "Come inside. We need to talk." I followed her through glass doors into a minimalist living room, clean, modern, with the faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air. She poured 2 glasses of wine without asking and gestured for me to sit. "I need to know what you want, Sloane," she said, using that name like it was natural now. Like I was natural. I don't know anymore," I whispered. "Then let me help you decide." She pulled out a folder, neat, black, branded with our company's logo. Inside was a new HR contract. Revised title, Executive Liaison. Permanent status. Higher pay. A travel allowance. Uniform, as professionally directed by Ms. Hart. I stared at it. "This isn't a joke?" I asked, voice catching. She didn't laugh. "You've proven you can follow. Now I want to see if you can lead while staying exactly as I've molded you. But people will notice. My past, they'll talk."
They already are, she said.
"And it's working in our favor. Your poise, your presence, it's disarming. So let them talk. You've already survived worse." I looked down at the elegant manicure, the pendant still around my neck. The image in the mirror earlier that night hadn't been some fleeting costume. It had been a reflection of who I was becoming. "Okay," I said quietly. "I'll sign it." She smiled, then not the cold, testing smile she wore in meetings, but something almost proud. "You're stronger than you think," she murmured. As I scrawled my name across the contract in careful cursive, the finality hit me. This wasn't just about one mistake anymore. It was about transformation.
Choice.
Identity. I wasn't who I had been, and I didn't want to go back. My first official day as Ms. Hart's executive liaison began before sunrise. I woke to the sound of a message pinging my phone, not from a friend, but from her assistant. A schedule had been sent. Outfits pre-selected. A driver was already downstairs. There was no time to second-guess. I stepped into the blush pink satin robe she'd sent over with the contract, the same one I pretended not to like, but secretly adored. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked artificial, but because I looked prepared. Hair softly styled, lips glossed with a quiet power. The name badge on my handbag read, Sloan M. Ellis, Executive Liaison. I arrived at the office to stares. Some were sharp and judgmental. Some amused. A few approving. Most confused. The men I used to talk sports with barely made eye contact. The women I once awkwardly avoided now looked me over like I was a curiosity they couldn't yet place. But I didn't flinch. Ms. Hart was already in the boardroom, reviewing files. When she saw me, she gave a small nod, a silent cue I had passed the morning's first test. "You're late," she said. I blinked. By 30 seconds. "Which means your priorities aren't mine yet. Sit." It was her way: challenge, then reward. She handed me a binder labeled Heart Expansion Initiative and asked me to present the overview to a room full of senior partners. My voice trembled at first, but then I found it. By the end, even Mr. Lennox, the most dismissive old-school partner in the company, nodded in reluctant approval. Ms. Hart didn't clap. She never would. But as the others filed out, she whispered, "You just earned more than your title." The rest of the day flew by in a blur of meetings, paperwork, and stiletto-quick footsteps across marble floors. But that night, alone in my apartment, I stood in front of the mirror again, dress unzipped, makeup softly smudged, and asked myself one terrifying question. What if this isn't just a job anymore? What if it's who I am now? I didn't have the answer. But I knew one thing. The old me would have quit by now. This version Sloan was just getting started. The next morning, something unexpected happened. As I walked confidently into the lobby, heels clicking in rhythm with my growing certainty, the security guard gave me a smile. "Morning, Miss Ellis." It was the first time someone had used that name outside of the executive suite. Not in mockery. Not in confusion. Just respect. I should have been thrilled. Instead, a nervous chill rippled through me. Because the more I blended into this version of myself, the more I realized how thin the line was between role-playing and reality. That line snapped completely when he showed up. Ethan Ward, my former coworker, the guy who used to sit 2 desks down, always cracking jokes, always poking fun at everything. He'd been transferred 6 months ago to another division, but now he was back, and worse, reassigned to Hart and Associates, main headquarters. He didn't recognize me at first. I was midway through organizing a contract handoff when I heard his voice behind me. "Hey, where's the real secretary? The new one's probably busy fixing her nails or filing makeup tutorials." I turned. His face twisted in slow-motion recognition. It started with confusion, then disbelief, and finally a wicked grin. "Wait a second. No way. Is that you?" I didn't flinch. Not this time. "It's Ms. Ellis now. Would you like to book a meeting?" He laughed, loud and mocking. "What is this, some kind of bet? Roleplay? You lose a fantasy football dare?" The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. But just before I could answer, Miss Hart appeared behind me, icy calm in her tone. "Mr. Ward, I suggest you remember that we don't tolerate juvenile behavior here. Ms. Ellis is my liaison. Speak to her again like that and you'll be speaking to HR." He sputtered. "It's just a joke. Then find a funnier one." She didn't even glance at me as she walked away. But I felt the message as clear as if she'd shouted it. "You're not going back. You're not allowed to. This is who you are now." That night, I stared at myself again. The makeup was heavier, the look sharper, and the posture more natural than ever. The only thing more intimidating than wearing the heels now was the thought of taking them off. And for the first time, I didn't want to. The next few days were tense. Ethan didn't drop it. He kept trying to corner me in the hallway, crack jokes in front of others, whisper, "Remember when you were normal?" Just loud enough for confusion to ripple through nearby interns. But I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Because Ms. Hart had started treating me like more than just her assistant. She invited me into confidential meetings, trusted me with contracts, and more than once, I caught her glancing at me during board presentations, not with suspicion, but pride. I belonged in her world now. I could feel it, and that terrified Ethan. So, he did what bullies do when they feel threatened. He tried to expose me. It happened on a Thursday. He barged into the break room while I was pouring tea, holding up an old photo he'd printed. One from the company picnic back when I was still just me, slouching in cargo shorts, laughing, holding a football. A version of me I barely recognized now. "Recognize this, Ms. Ellis?" he said, sneering. "You gonna explain to the rest of us how this happened?" The room went silent. Several heads turned. My hands trembled slightly, but I didn't panic. Instead, I set down my teacup, turned to him, and smiled. "Funny," I said calmly. "You dug through my past just to prove what, exactly? That people evolve." He looked stunned. Ms. Hart's voice came from the doorway. "They evolve or they're replaced." Everyone turned. She walked in, heels clicking, arms folded. "Mr. Ward, is there a reason you're distributing private images of a colleague?" He stammered. "I was just showing. HR will be interested in your reasoning," she said coolly. "In the meantime, your badge access is revoked. Leave." He turned pale. "You're firing me over him?" "Her." Ms. Hart's voice was ice. "You'll address Ms. Ellis with respect. If you can't do that, this isn't the company for you." The silence was absolute. Ethan stormed out. And in that moment, something changed. Not just in how others saw me, but in how I saw me. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was becoming. The office buzzed for a few days after Ethan's dramatic exit. But for once, I wasn't the subject of whispered gossip. I was the example. The one who stood her ground. The one Ms. Hart defended. I began to hold myself differently. Not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence. I learned how to walk into a room and own it, heels clicking like punctuation behind every step. I spoke less, but when I did, people leaned in. Ms. Hart noticed. On Monday morning, she called me into her office. Her voice was calm. Almost too calm. "I've been observing your progress, Ms. Ellis," she said, glancing at the fresh polish on my fingers. "You've been more composed, more reliable, and frankly more elegant." I swallowed, unsure where this was going. She slid a slim, lavender-colored folder across the table. The scent of her perfume clung to it. Inside was a formal promotion offer. Same department. New title. Executive assistant. But I thought I already was. I said hesitantly. "That was a trial," she said, eyes sharp. "Now it's official." I looked at the paperwork, then at her. She leaned forward. "But this new role comes with certain expectations. I don't just need an assistant. I need a representative of me. Someone polished, composed, always in heels, always poised." Her tone softened. "Do you understand, Ms. Ellis?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I do." She smiled and slid a slim velvet box across the desk. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, a charm in the shape of a key. "You'll wear this every day," she said, "to remind you who unlocked this version of you." My throat tightened. Symbolic. Permanent. Binding. I clasped the necklace around my neck right then and there. And when I looked up, Ms. Hart's expression wasn't just professional anymore. It was proud. My first day as her official executive assistant started with something unexpected. Ms. Hart handed me a white shopping bag with elegant black handles. "Put this on before the clients arrive," she said without further explanation. Inside was a tailored blush pink blouse, a satin pencil skirt, and matching heels. All my size. All perfectly feminine. I paused. Any reason why? I asked cautiously. Her eyebrow arched. Because it's what my assistant wears. You said you understood. That word again, mine. I changed in the executive washroom. When I emerged, I barely recognized myself. The silk clung in all the right places. The heels gave my posture confidence I hadn't known I needed, and the shade of pink made me feel soft. Powerful. Chosen. When I re-entered her office, Ms. Hart simply gave a nod of approval. Then, in front of everyone, the visiting clients, the board members, the interns, she introduced me confidently. This is Madison, my executive assistant. She handles all sensitive matters. And she never disappoints. I blushed. But I also stood taller. Throughout the day, she gave me subtle tasks that made me feel like more than just her employee. She asked me to choose her lipstick shade before a lunch meeting. She had me rehearse her speech with her, correcting my tone until I sounded exactly how she wanted. At one point, she even adjusted a stray hair from my bun and whispered, "Always polished, darling. You represent me." There was something thrilling about being shaped this way. Controlled. Yes, but with care. With purpose. I found myself wanting to impress her. To be her perfect reflection. And when she handed me a sleek planner engraved with the initials MH and said, "Hold on to this, schedule my life like it's yours," I felt something shift inside. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was becoming an identity. The next morning, she called me in early before the rest of the office lights flicked on, before the coffee machine even finished brewing. "Close the door," she said quietly, her back turned, facing the skyline outside her window. I obeyed, heart thudding. She turned slowly, holding something in her hand. A slim velvet box. "I've decided you'll be presenting with me at tomorrow's investor brunch," she said. "And if you're going to be by my side, you need this." She opened the box to reveal a pair of delicate pearl earrings and a matching bracelet. Feminine. Elegant. Symbolic. I don't know if I can," I whispered. She didn't force. She didn't argue. She simply walked toward me, fastened the bracelet gently around my wrist, and said, "You already are." The touch lingered. I wore them, and the next day, as I stood beside her, notes in hand, posture perfect, dressed in her chosen soft lavender suit set, I realized something strange. No one questioned it. Not the board. Not the media reps. Not even the senior partners I used to outrank. They looked at me like I had always been this person. Ms. Hart introduced me with pride. "Madison ensures my life runs perfectly. She knows what I need before I ask." They smiled. I smiled. But inside, I felt a cocktail of fear and euphoria. Later, after the meeting, she took me out for wine, just the two of us. "You know," she said, swirling her glass, "when you first made that mistake at work, I thought I'd have to fire you." I lowered my eyes. "But instead," she said, touching my chin so I looked at her, "you became something far more useful. Someone I can mold. Someone I can rely on." I should have felt insulted. Instead, I felt chosen. I wasn't supposed to be in her office alone. But she'd left in a hurry that afternoon, another executive call, another urgent meeting. And I had orders. Clean up the files, relabel the client folders, and make sure her desk was as polished as her standards. Simple. Except, I saw it. The folder on her desktop. Labeled in bold. Madison. Phase 2. I froze. It wasn't open. It wasn't encrypted either. Just sitting there. Like bait. I shouldn't have clicked it. But I did. Inside were PDFs. Dozens of them. Notes. Behavior logs. Wardrobe suggestions. Voice training links. And at the very bottom, a letter. Madison will resist at first, but with time and affirmation, she will accept the role she was meant for. My breath caught. My name was all over it. Timelines. Checklists. Even small observations like, "She fidgets when complimented, use that." I backed away from the screen, trembling. I'd been part of a plan. Not a punishment. A process. A transformation. The door opened behind me, and I jumped. Ms. Hart stood there, arms folded, eyes unreadable. "I see you've taken initiative," she said calmly. I started to stammer an apology, but she raised a hand. "I knew you'd look eventually. It was just a matter of time." "Why?" I asked, voice barely audible. She walked slowly toward me. "Because you needed direction. And because I saw something in you the day you messed up that client pitch. A spark. Potential." I shook my head. "You could have told me." "I could have," she agreed. "But then you wouldn't have become Madison. Not like this. Not with such conviction." I couldn't speak. "Now," she said softly, pulling a small white envelope from her blazer. "Your new ID badge arrived. It says, Executive Secretary, Madison Blake. I suggest you start using it." She left it on the desk and turned to leave. "And Madison?" "Yes," I said without thinking. "You look more like yourself every day."